Hey everyone, my name is Paul Matsushima. I was the program manager at Kizuna, but since I have moved on, I now work at Fuller Graduate Schools.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie. I was development and marketing coordinator at Kizuna, and the three of us together were co-authors on Thank You Very Mochi. And now I'm working on mostly freelance art stuff.
I'm Craig. I was the executive director of the organization, and Paul and Sophie and I sat in 3 desks that were probably within 4 feet from each other. But this is kind of one of the first times that we've gotten together since global pandemic, or actually since Sophie moved to London. So good to see everyone.
A couple of different things that we were thinking about at the time. A lot of what we did was youth programming. So at the time we were able to deliver these programs to kids from age 7 all the way through post-college. But we didn't really have anything for kids that were younger than that. But I think also for me, it was really fun working on something that could be something of like a keepsake, but it's really nice to have something that you can physically hold in your hands and also pass down, through generations.
If I remember correctly, Mochitsuki is not only staple to Japanese American community, but was really staple to Kizuna. We participated in the one at Tanaka Farms every year, and then we would have a number of workshops that we would do every year. Like one of the first workshops that we did, we wrote a story that wasn't super similar to this, but was like its spiritual predecessor. We were constantly looking at different ways to deliver cultural education material to kids. So storytelling became part of it, writing, drawing, and so you can sort of see that all of that was kind of part of the early conversations before even the book was even a thought.
One of our very first years of doing our summer camp program, Glenn Tanaka and his crew came out and they lugged out all the Mochitsuki equipment and did the workshop for us, and it was a hit. The parents loved it, and so Craig and I were like, oh, this is a great activity. We should do it ourselves and not have to be reliant on Tanaka Farms to bring out all their supplies. And then as part of that, I wrote a story as a sort of like an educational piece. And then during one of the workshops, a parent came up to us and was like, that was a really good story. You should turn it into a children's book. And that's kind of where the idea really started to take into fruition. So the original story that accompanied the workshop, I wrote it with my sister as the protagonist, and it was a story of them going to our grandparents' house and sort of learning about Mochitsuki.
When we first sat down to write this story, the story that we wrote was very different than the story that even Paul had before, and very different than the one that we have now. I think at that point we were thinking, yes, about family, but also about how to get at this feeling that a lot of kids feel of, oh, we have to do Mochitsuki every year. And so we kind of leaned too far into the Mochi is this really annoying thing. And I think a lot of the process was regrounding it, right, in that story of family.
I mean, for a while, I think part of the reason why we wrote it that way is that even for a lot of us growing up, even for me in Boy Scouts, having to wake up super early and wash the rice at OCBC, it's like, I don't want to do this, right? But then later in life, having the appreciation for it, right? I think that was part of the original story.
I grew up doing Mochitsuki every year, but we did it with the machines. And so we would always have a gathering, we'd invite our cousins over and some of our close friends, and there'd be a gathering of 20 to 30 of us. On New Year's Day, we'd go over to my uncle's house, and he'd always cook up a big pot of ozoni, and we'd use the mochi that we had made a couple days before for that. And that was always a big family tradition of mine growing up.
So I'm Chinese American, I'm not Japanese American, but as Craig always says, our community is whoever wants to be a part of the community. So one thing that we do for there's a couple of Chinese holidays is you take mochi flour and you make these little I don't even know what they're called in English, but yuanzi, but they're basically just tiny little mochi balls. The thing that we actually did together, because it's easy enough that a little kid can do it, is you just kind of roll the mochi flour and the water together, and you make these little balls. So I actually thought it was really interesting that mochi is kind of this thing that brings families together no matter the way that you make it, and no matter what their culture is.
Yeah, I think besides family coming together, Mochitsuki, the only other thing that I think a lot of families are going through, which it sort of alludes to kind of that topic that we were talking about earlier, of, sort of the diversity of families, is everybody brings a dish at New Year's, everybody brings a dish at Christmas. And I think whilst the spread maybe like 50 years ago was like all osechi, it was all Japanese food, now you're starting to see like just different types of dishes, just all sorts, right? Like there might be like tortilla casserole, and it really doesn't matter. Like, because at the end of the day, the bottom line, the through line is just family.